It says here, tens of thousands of Palestinians seek shelter after Israeli assaults across the West Bank. And it says here, make sure you guys can see this. It says here, when Israeli snipers took positions in her neighborhood, Halime Zawede knew her family needed to leave quickly. As the sniper's gunfire ranged out, the 63-year-old matriarch said there was no time to pack as she and her 14 other family members fled on foot. So you have snipers shooting at people, and people are running away. The invasion of Jenin was faster than past Israeli assaults, she said. And this goes to show you what I mean by how we are living in a different time period. People say, oh, well, back in 2005, Israel gave up Gaza. Back in the early days, Israel wasn't this bad, because we are living in a different age. We're living in a new zeitgeist. That's what I'm trying to tell you people. We're living in a new zeitgeist. We are going through a shift in this age of ours. That's what zeitgeist means. The spirit of the times. Zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. And so we see what in this shift in the zeitgeist? Fanaticism intensifying in Israel. And that's why you read stories about soldiers going into random Palestinian homes saying, you have this many days to leave, or else we're going to burn your house down, or we're going to hurt you, or we're going to beat you, or we're going to kill you. What's happening? What's happening is the paving of the way towards a genocide of the Palestinians. That's what's happening. So it says here that the invasion of Jenin was faster than past Israeli assaults, and now, like some 37,000 other Palestinians, the UN estimates have been driven out by a month-old offensive against militant groups in the occupied West Bank. Zawede and her family are waiting to return to the place they've long called home. So 40,000 people, last I checked, 40,000 people have been kicked out of their homes in the West Bank. So the war in Gaza, it has been put on pause. That shit's gonna resume. That nightmare's not gonna end. But it's being put on pause right now, and so now you see ethnic cleansing being done in the West Bank. So Israel always needs a war happening. It's got to have a war taking place because it has a big defense industry. But it's unclear if Israel will let them. So the Israeli government has already said that these Palestinians will not be allowed to return back to their homes. This is what Israel has said. They will not be allowed to return back to their homes. So it goes on to say, Israel's assaults has mostly emptied 4 refugee camps, sites that originated to house Palestinians driven from homes in the 1948 war surrounding Israel's creation, and have since grown into densely built-up towns or neighborhoods. Across the 4 camps, troops have ripped up roads and destroyed buildings, infrastructure, and water and electricity lines. And it's quite amazing that the mainstream media is not talking a whole lot about this. I mean, the AP does an article on it, which is good. But I went into Google News today, and Google News is the place to go where you want to get the mainstream news. And I went into Google News today. I typed in the West Bank, and I didn't see a lot of articles talking about this. I wonder why. I wonder why that is. Very strange. Tens of thousands of people forced out of their homes, and this is not a big international story. And it says here, okay, I already read this. The Israeli defense minister said Monday that troops were preparing to stay for a year and would prevent Palestinians from returning. Oh, they're going to stay longer than a year. And they're going to keep pushing people out, and they're going to build settlements, and they're going to expand the settlements, and that's what this is about. It's about expanding Jewish presence, because they believe that the Jewish race is superior to the Palestinians. That's what they believe. They believe that the Jewish race is superior to the Arab race. So they think that they have a right to do this. Now they will say, well, we're fighting terrorism. Every country that has ever done a genocide or a policy of ethnic cleansing has said that they are there to fight a war or to fight terrorism. When Otto von Bismarck forced tens of thousands of Poles and Jews out of their homes, he said that it was because, well, you had Polish people who were trying to do an uprising against German occupation. And when Otto von Bismarck said that he wanted to exterminate all of the Poles under German power, under German reign, he said so in the context of dealing with Polish resistance to German rule. When the Turks exterminated 1 million Armenians, they said, well, they were Armenian terrorists around and they were killing civilians. And so the Armenian problem needed to be ended. And they did so, or they worked to end their problem with the Armenians by exterminating them. When the Nazis exterminated people in the Soviet Union, they did so under the pretext of a war. And they said that they were there to fight Bolshevik terror. And there was indeed a Bolshevik terror. So they used that reality to justify genocide. Every genocide that has ever been committed has been done under the pretext of a war. This is no different. And it's very sad that historians don't press upon this reality enough, because I think that if more and more people understood this, they would be able to recognize the deception that is utilized to justify atrocities. So when atrocities happen today, people say, well, they're fighting a war, so it's understandable. And they don't understand that this has been the textbook argument for genocide in modern history. That leaves thousands who hail from among the poorest areas of the West Bank in dire straits, as many are forced to rent temporary housing in neighboring villages. OCHA, the UN's humanitarian agency, said there is an urgent need for cash assistance for 4,000 families to meet rent needs. Help is limited. The Palestinian Authority is strapped for cash, and the main UN agency for Palestinian refugees, known by the acronym UNRWA, UNRWA, has been handicapped by Israeli legislation, and that is the reason why they got rid of UNRWA. They got rid of UNRWA, and then they commenced this policy of expulsion. And now they don't have the UN there to help these people, because the idea is to make these people's lives so miserable that they're going to leave. That's the idea. This is like when Otto von Bismarck said about the Poles, hit the Poles so hard that they will live such miserable lives that they will leave. And he said that what the Poles really need is extermination. So Otto von Bismarck promoted the idea of mass expulsion, but as a follow-up to that, he promoted the idea, or he aspired for a policy of extermination on the Polish people. This is textbook stuff. Textbook stuff. So it says here, after announcing a widespread crackdown against West Bank militants on January 21st, just 2 days after it began a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza, Israeli forces descended on Jenin camp, as they have done dozens of times since Hamas's October the 7th, 2023 attack on Israel. But unlike past operations, Israeli forces also pushed deeper and more forcefully into several other camps, nearby camps known as bastions of militant groups, including Tulkarm, Farah, and Nur Sham. So they're going all the way. They're going beyond the Jenin camp, and they're taking more and more Palestinian territory. I know that's kind of controversial to say, but that's what's happening. I didn't read this full article, so I didn't get a chance to highlight all of it, but let's just see what else it says. Israel's military says it has engaged in fierce battles with Palestinian militants inside the camps, which are now mainly emptied of their civilian populations. The dispersals are stirring bitter memories of the 1948 war, etc., etc. It says here that in Nur Shams, a smaller refugee camp with a population of roughly 13,700 people, a number of displaced people returned Wednesday to clear what possessions they could from their homes after learning the Israeli military had slated them for demolition. So this is indeed ethnic cleansing. That's what this is. So you can't come back to your home because your home is no longer there. Your home is gone. Palestinians said the military puts out maps of intended demolitions in the camps. Asked the reasons for the demolitions, the military said it could not discuss operational plans. Yes, that's because the operational plan is to replace them with settlers. That's what it is. This is a settlement cult agenda. Guys, there is a religious aspect in all this. There is a very, very strong religious component in all of this. And that is this idea that land, it belongs solely to the Jews, and therefore the Jews have a right to expel people out of their homes and to demolish those people's homes, or to even steal their homes. And that type of thing has happened in the past. And they believe that they had the right to do this because God gave them the land. So there is a religious underlying foundation in all of this. And so they think that God is on their side. That's what they believe. God is on their side, and that they have a right given to them by God to do what they are doing. And they are fanatics who believe that God even gave them the right to exterminate those people. That's what they believe. And so that's why I say a genocide of the Palestinians is inevitable. It is inevitable, and we will see it in the future. Humanity will see it in the future. And it's going to be something straight out of the Holocaust. It's going to be very, very ugly. Very ugly. And people are going to wonder, well, how did this happen? Why is this happening? And the Israelis are going to say, well, we are justified because we're fighting terrorism and we have to get rid of this problem once and for all. So we're going to do so through genocide, extermination. We're going to kill these people. And you're going to see videos of settlers saying, we have right to do, God gave us that, we have right to do this, blah, 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 blah. And then you're going to see these evangelical Zionists on the internet saying, well, God gave them the land, so they have a right. And that's what my Bible says. My Bible says, do you know how many times Israel was mentioned? They say the Bible has Israel being mentioned thousands of times. Israel is mentioned in my Bible thousands of times. I don't know what Bible you're reading, but in my Bible, Israel is the apple of God's eye. That's the apple of God's eye. So therefore, we as Gentiles, we got to honor Israel. And they get into this word concept fallacy, and I learned that from Jay Dyer, but they to give credit to where credit is due, they get into this word concept fallacy where they see Israel in the Bible and they automatically believe that that is the modern day state of Israel. When the reality is that when it talks about Israel, it is talking about the people who follow God. That's what is meant by Israel. The people who worship the God of Abraham. That's what that means. That's why when you read in the book of Esther, it talks about droves of people converting to the religion of Mordecai and Esther. That's why you read about Ruth, who is an Arab woman who follows the religion of Moab. And that's why you have Christ preaching to the Gentiles. That's why you have St. Peter and St. Paul speaking with the Gentiles. Because Israel is what? Israel is the people that follow God, the God of Israel. People think, oh, Bill Maher, he's a member of the Chosen. Bill Maher, Peter Singer, Dennis Prager, they're members of the Chosen. Dennis Prager, the guy who says, the Bible says men, you can be just as happy with boys as you would with girls. The guy who says that, according to the evangelicals, is a member of God's chosen people. And now we have to honor Rabbi Dennis Prager. As evil and perverted as he is, we have to honor this pervert. We have to honor this freak, this evil individual, this evil scoundrel, because according to the evangelicals, he is now a member of the chosen people. It's insanity. But do you know what the Bible says about that? Do you know what the Bible says about this fixation on Jerusalem? It says, Jerusalem will be a trembling cup for the world, and everyone who elevates Jerusalem will be cut asunder. And that's why the Crusades eventually failed. That's why you have these Christians who worship Israel, and they're crazy. That's why they're crazy, because Jerusalem is a trembling cup. What does that mean? It means Jerusalem is like a cup of wine. People drink it, and they turn insane. So Jesus comes along, and he says, okay, you can either drink the cup of my blood, which redeems sins, which saves humanity, or you can drink the cup of Jerusalem and turn insane. Which one is it? So on the Last Supper, Jesus said, here is my blood. He takes the chalice and it has the wine in it, and he says, here is my blood, which is shed for the redemption of many, which is shed for the redemption of mankind. Drink of this so that you may be saved. Drink of the cup of Christ and eat of the flesh of Christ. And so we have a choice either to drink the cup of Christ or to drink the trembling cup that is Jerusalem. That is the choice. That is the choice. And unfortunately, too many people have decided to drink of the trembling cup, and they are drunk with delusion. And that is why you see them acting delusional. That's why you see them acting crazy. You tell them, look at the war crimes done by Israel. I don't care. God gave them the land. I don't care. Look, here's an Israeli sniper murdering a grandmother in front of her grandkid. I don't give a damn. Look, here's a story about Israeli soldiers competing over who can kill the most civilians. I don't care because God gave them the land. That is sick, evil, twisted, and delusional. But this is what happens when you drink the cup of Jerusalem. And read about the Crusades. People went to Jerusalem to liberate Jerusalem. And what happened? The Crusades ended up being a total failure, and you had horrible events like the Battle of Mansoura, in which 30,000 Crusaders lost their lives fighting the Turks in Egypt. That was the result of the Crusades. And ultimately, that was a result of the Pope saying, we have to liberate Jerusalem because we, the Catholics, are the new Jews. And so being the new Jews, we have to go to Israel and establish a Catholic state in Israel. Essentially, proto-Zionists. It was like Zionism. We're going to go there. It's our land. We're the true Jews. That land belongs to us. They went to Israel, Canaan, the Holy Land, whatever you want to call it. They killed a bunch of people. Yes, they did do good things. They did remove the Turkish power or the Muslim power that was there, that was persecuting the church. That is true. But the Crusaders themselves went nuts. They went crazy. And the Christians even killed each other eventually. They were killing each other for certain parts of the Holy Land. And they were competing over who was gonna have power over the Holy Land. And eventually people got sick and tired of the Crusades, and eventually most Europeans told the Pope to go F himself. And then there was King St. Louis, and he said, well, I'm going to go, Holy Father. I will arise to the call. I will answer the call, and I will fight for the Holy Land. And so he fought the Turks in Egypt, and then there was the disastrous Battle of Mansoura, in which the Turks devastated the Crusades in the worst, most devastating battle in the history of Crusader battles, and 30,000 Crusaders were slaughtered in the Battle of Mansoura. Why? Because the Turks were armed with blue fire. That's why. The Turks had blue fire, and if you got hit with an arrow that was armed with blue fire, you weren't going to make it. And the Turks blocked the food, because the Europeans, the Crusaders, were using this river. I think it was the Nile River in Egypt. They were using this river to transport food so they could eat. And you know what the Turks did? They just blocked the river. They said, no, you ain't going to get no food. So they starved them. They burned them alive with blue fire, and the Crusaders lost. It was a failure. The Crusaders were an absolute failure. It didn't work. Because why? Because it goes back to what God said. I will make Jerusalem into a trembling cup for the nations, and anyone who elevates Jerusalem will be cut asunder. That's what it says in the Bible. That's what it says in the book of Zechariah. And that's why you see the Zionist lunacy. That's why you see that. This is a very sad story. It says, Muhammad Abdullah took advantage of the brief access to visit the grave of his son, Ali, who he said was killed by Israeli troops during a previous incursion into the camp. He hadn't been able to visit since being forced out 2 weeks ago. Abdullah then packed up his family's things from his home. No one can take anything, he said. Every person has memories in his home, in his neighborhood, in the streets. The damage to the camps has been extensive. In Jenin camp, troops have demolished over 100 homes, Friedrich said. In Tolkadam, they have destroyed about 100 housing units and at least 300 commercial shops and set, what the hell? 300 shops? That's insane. This is huge. This is massive destruction of entire neighborhoods. Massive expulsion of tens of thousands of people. And I am shocked that the mainstream media is not talking about this. I wonder why that is. Is the Trump administration telling the media not to talk so much about? What's going on? And AP is reporting on this. And remember, AP is hated by the Trump administration because the AP News said, yeah, we're not going to call it the Gulf of America. We're going to call it the Gulf of Mexico. And Trump said, well, you're not allowed into the press meeting, blah, blah, blah. But you know, God bless AP for shedding light on this. Look at this. 300 businesses just destroyed just like that? That's insane. That is insane, guys. Utterly insane. Set fire to at least 10 homes, according to the local Adwa Community Center. At a charity for helping the blind in Jenin, converted into a shelter for those driven from the camp. Barefoot children swung from monkey bars, etc., etc. Some 85 people from 23 families have taken up to the shelter. Rooms have been turned into separate dorms for men and women and children, etc., etc. Facing mounting financial pressure and worried for their homes, many families have tried to return to the camps only to be blocked by the military. Every day we try to go back to the camp, hoping to enter, but they prevent us, said Nazmi Turkmen. They've set up checkpoints, placed tanks, and stationed soldiers. Even drones are flying around. Oh, don't tell me that this is only going to last a year. When you read about them setting up checkpoints and parking tanks in these areas and destroying streets and burning down or destroying hundreds of businesses, they're not going anywhere. This is about creating settlements. They're literally going after Lebensraum. That's what this is about. The Palestinian Authority, the body charged with administering affairs in pockets of the West Bank where the camps lie, has denounced the wave of displacement. It says it has dispatched over 16 trucks of aid and sent funds to first responders, but its ability to help is limited. It has been left cash-strapped by the war, with Israel for months holding up tax revenues it needs to pay its workers, etc., etc. What is happening in the West Bank is a continuation of what the Israeli authorities did in the Gaza Strip. That's correct. Yep, this is exactly what it is. It's a continuation of what Israel did in Gaza, and it's just ethnic cleansing. That's what this is. And you watch, this is eventually going to escalate into genocide. Now, why am I so certain of that? Because there are people who would doubt me, and they would say, no, Israel is the most moral country in the world. History is a teacher. History is a teacher. And if history is a lesson to us, what we know from history is that when a stronger power is dealing with uprisings by weaker people. Okay. Let me rephrase because my brain just glitched out there. I'm so sorry, guys. What we know from history is that when you have a country that is dealing with uprisings from people that it is occupying, what happens many times in history is a genocide. What eventually happens is that the fighting culminates to the point where the occupier decides to do a genocide. Or some kind of ethnic cleansing. When Otto von Bismarck was dealing with Polish freedom fighters, Otto von Bismarck expelled tens of thousands of people. And he did a Kulturkampf policy. He did the Kulturkampf policy in which Poles were forced to become Germans. They were forced to forsake their Polish identity and to adopt a German identity. Polish Catholic priests were forced out of their parishes and were replaced by German Catholic priests. And people were kicked out of their homes. People were driven out of their homes. And this was all part of the tensions between the Germans and the Poles. And eventually, these tensions built up to the point where the Germans eventually decided to genocide the Poles, and they massacred millions of Polish people. And I'm not even talking about the genocide of the Jews in Poland. I'm talking about the genocide of non-Jewish Polish people. Millions of them were butchered by the Nazi regime with the help of their Ukrainian allies. And so what was that? That was the culmination of years and years and years of animosity that the Germans had for Polish people, and years and years and years of the Germans believing that they were superior to the Slavic race and therefore they were superior to the Polish people. And eventually you saw the Germans just do a genocide. Similar thing, or really the same thing, happened with the Ottoman Empire and the Armenians. The Armenians wanted to have their own state. They were occupied by the Ottomans. And the Armenians continued to fight and to pursue a state, the idea of an independent Armenian state. And eventually the Ottomans concluded that the only way to deal with Armenian resistance was to simply exterminate the Armenians. That's what the Ottomans did. So fast forward to our own time, and what do you see? You see decades and decades of fighting and tension taking place and building up between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The Palestinians are the occupied. The Israelis are the occupier. The Israelis are thus the stronger party in this struggle. And so if history is any lesson to us, what we know is that inevitably the Israelis are just going to genocide the Palestinians. So it says here, this is an article that came out, published by Haaretz. It says, at own initiative, Israeli soldiers illegally expel Palestinian families in West Bank. So you have these Israeli soldiers who are going out of their way to expel people from their homes without even getting permission from the Israeli government to do this. Supposedly, that's what the story says. The Israeli government is saying, well, we didn't tell these people to do that, so perhaps the Israeli government is lying. Perhaps these soldiers are simply following protocol, and they're doing so under the guise of going rogue. But who knows? I mean, what this article says is that the Israeli government never ordered these soldiers to do these actions. These actions are throwing people out of their homes. But the reality is that the Israeli government is already doing this in the West Bank, so this might as well just be protocol. So it says here, soldiers serving near the West Bank settlement of Beit Aryeh have expelled Palestinian families living in the area. A move, the army says, was done on the troops' own initiative in breach of protocol. Yeah, it's quite obvious what's happening. And this also goes to show that there is a huge element within the IDF that consists of psychopaths, religious fanatics, and they want to use the Israeli military to do ethnic cleansing and ultimately a genocide, because they believe that God gave them the right to do that. I think that there is a split within the Israeli armed forces. I think that there is a split within the Israeli military. You have people in the Israeli military who are moderates, who don't want to be involved in any of this sort of crime. They don't want to be involved in doing war crimes or atrocities. And then you have a lot of soldiers who love the idea of war crimes, and they love the idea of participating in atrocities and ethnic cleansing and even murder and thievery. And I think that this element within the IDF has been really taking over the military, really taking over. And I think eventually there's going to be a civil war in Israel between the more politically moderate Israelis and the fanatical Israelis, just like there was a civil war between Jews who were not in favor of a war with Rome and Jews who were in favor of a war with Rome. There was a civil war that happened after the resurrection of Christ in which this happened. So that's what happened. So it says here that soldiers serving near the families say soldiers told them last week they had a week to leave, and the soldiers returned every few days to repeat their message. On Thursday morning, soldiers told the families they had 4 hours to depart, and some families obeyed. Bilal Mahadik, a local resident, says the expulsion attempts began last week when 4 soldiers told him and members of 5 other families that they had a week to leave. 2 days ago, so this guy says 2 days ago, they came again and told us we had to leave. And today they said we had 4 hours, he told Haaretz. We don't know where to go. We want to stay, but we're afraid that the soldiers will beat us. He says the residents believe that the attempt to expel them is linked to an unauthorized settler outpost nearby in the northern West Bank. Oh, unauthorized settler outpost. So there's a settler outpost in the area. The settlers want the Palestinians pushed out. And so these Israelis are following suit. They're saying, okay, Palestinians, you got to leave for the sake of Lebensraum, for the sake of gaining more living space for the Israeli Jews, for the settlers. The army has designated the area where Mahadik lives as Firing Zone 203, a training area that the army has not used for many years, and where Havat Avihai is located. Dror Etkis of the rights group Kedem Navot says no demolition orders have been issued against any Palestinian buildings in the area, and aerial photos show that families have been present there since at least 2007. Not far from... Now, these people are not terrorists. That's the thing. People say, oh, it's about fighting terrorism. These people who these soldiers are pushing under threats to leave their homes are not terrorists, and they're still being forced out of their homes. Not far from Mahadik's house is the farm of Abdullah Darwish, 57, from the village of Al-Luban Al-Gharbi. He lives on the farm where he raises livestock. He says soldiers first came to the place a week ago, Thursday, February 20th. They said curses that I won't repeat and pushed my wife. They beat me with a rifle on the side of the chest. He added, I told them, what do you want? And tried to talk with them, but they told me to keep quiet. The soldier told me, you won't be here. If you're here Thursday, I'll burn you and this place. They then threw a stun grenade between me and my wife. So this is an obvious war crime, or it's just a crime, and this is obviously an action done with the intention of ethnically cleansing an area. And are these people terrorists? Is this farmer a terrorist? Are these people terrorists? But here they are being harassed. Here they are being threatened with being burned alive. The soldiers returned Monday when Darwish was at the farm with his wife and 3 children. They attacked us. Why have you stayed? Why aren't you dismantling things? He quoted a soldier as saying. The soldiers then fired into the air. My son wanted to film what was happening, so they broke his phone. So much for freedom of the press. Then they took one of my children and beat him in the stomach with a rifle. He tried to move the rifle, and the soldiers said he'd handcuff him. Darwish said the soldiers claimed his son tried to grab the rifle, but he only tried to move it away as he was being beaten. Darwish added that 2 soldiers then took his son to the checkpoint and left him there until the morning on the coldest day of the year. The boy was taken for questioning the next day and released. Darwish said, adding that despite the threats, he had no intention of leaving. So why did they release him? Because this guy's not a terrorist. These people aren't terrorists. The army added that there were illegal buildings built in a firing zone. Etkes said Darwish's farm is not in the land designated as a firing zone. It's clear that the initiative of a local army officer who decided on his own to expel a community of shepherds who have lived at the site for years is no coincidence. This is another blatant example of the army's disintegration and the transformation of parts of it into militias operating according to an independent agenda in the service of the most violent and extremist settlers. So these are soldiers who are fanatical extremists, and they are breaking protocol to follow their own ideology, to enforce their own ideology of ethnically cleansing the land of Arabs so that Jews can build settlements there. That's what this is. This is fanatical, psycho-ass settler ideology, and it's a psycho-ass settler agenda being done by soldiers on their own accord. And this is, as the article says, really an example or an exemplification of factions within the IDF forming their own militias and doing their own missions for the cause of their own agenda. So the IDF really is fragmented by factionalism. And this is why I say, this is one of the reasons why I say, I think there's going to be a civil war in Israel between the fanatics and the more moderate Israelis.